Away. Okay, so Splunk, you've fairly recently published the Hidden Costs of Downtime report. I guess before we sort of drill down into what it's revealed, it'd be just good to understand the background, why you thought it was necessary, what was the objective in carrying out the research.
Oh, I think a really interesting thing about the cost of downtime was it can come from so many different places, and people will never quite quantify what downtime means. And the thing that came out for me most from the report, what I took away from it when I read it for the first time, was a lot of it was talking about reputational risk, but actually the deceleration of your innovation velocity. And so that you can quantify lots of different parts about it, from a monetary point of view. The bit I took away from it was actually it just reduces confidence in your digital systems, which means you don't get to market as fast as you want to with that next bit or the next improvement.
Okay, yeah, so I believe the report sort of identified two kinds of costs associated with unplanned downtime. There's the sort of direct costs and the hidden costs. So perhaps you can just talk us through a bit of the direct. I guess obviously there's money is one of the direct costs or cost, but yeah, if you can talk us through the direct costs first, and then we can look at the hidden ones.
Yeah, so we used Oxford Economics. They provided a lot of the research for the report across 10 industries, 53 countries represented in the report. And what we found that the downtime costs the global 2000 companies $400 billion annually. So that's around about 200 million per company, or to quantify that a bit more, about 9% of their profits can be associated with the cost of downtime. So it's quite a big thing. Some of the big headline figures within that $200 million per company was around 49 million in lost revenue. Quite applicable for those businesses working, especially in the European Union and wider Europe. 22 million in regulatory fines. You got things like SLA penalties came in about 16 million. Things that I thought that we talk about a lot that didn't come up quite as high were things like ransomware and other things like that. That was down at 8 million. So a lot lower than things like lost productivity, overtime wages, and some of the other type of issues that you commonly see in the press.
Okay, oh, that's quite a sort of headline catching figure that sum, but also alongside that the hidden costs which maybe don't grab the headlines as much, but I think you alluded to at the top of the interview, still have quite a significant impact. So what were some of those that were
Yeah.
uncovered?
So I think the big thing was stock price dropping. So it drops about 2.5% on average after a single downtime event and takes around about 79 days to recover. 2.5% doesn't sound like much, but when you take a large organization, 2.5% is a significant amount of money. And then most of the technology executives, around 74% of them, said that downtime delays time to market. And I think one of the things we're seeing now is it is such a competitive market for any industry out there. Digitization is how you go to market. So any delay can be costly because it's not just delay to market, it's then confidence on have you got a top class product? Are you able to support it, maintain it? The knock-on effects start to go and exacerbate the issue. So I think it's that 74% of the delays in getting to market were really, really high. And then there's reputational risk. And I think a couple of things, downtime sinks the customer lifetime value. So it's 44% downtime damages of reputation. And then 29% of the people started talking about losing customers due to downtime. And I think it's very easy now to switch providers nowadays. Increasingly, it's the service you want, not necessarily the company you want to use. So, like a car ride sharing. I want the one that I trust that can get me from A to B. If you arrive at an airport, you try one of the vendors and it says 20 minutes. Within seconds, you can actually go and download an app, register for a new service, and test to see if one of their competitors has something else. So I think we're definitely seeing that in the marketplace now. A lot more fickle customers. They want the service, not necessarily the brand they're working for.
Okay, and I wondered, did the report identify the main causes of unplanned downtime? Yeah, just what was revealed in terms of the why it goes wrong, if you like.
Yeah, so I'm going to disappoint you and all of the listeners to say it wasn't artificial intelligence. Actually, most of the errors, the top two errors that came out were basically user error. that we found that it was misconfiguration of IT equipment or IT processes, applications. And then the second one was simple cybersecurity errors. So that may be forgetting to go and secure, the classic one used to be an S3 bucket with kind of cloud services. So those kind of top two, human errors and kind of your standard IT failures coming in right at the top. And we could say that, why are we still having those today? We should have got, we have architectural best practices. We have lots of different types of security software. I think the reality is, as we try and get to market faster, we are using more and more complicated technology. We're integrating lots of different SaaS services together. It's not kind of Splunk talking, just general, like what our customers are doing. So integrating SaaS services, building some of their own applications, adding an authentication, adding data services in, maybe AI services, and the complexity is increasing. It's meaning we're creating more powerful products as an industry, but the complexity is increasing. So that chance for error is just creeping up and up and up.
And you mentioned the report covers a sort of global audiences who you talk to. So I'm just wondering, did you identify any particular sort of regional variations in terms of either the particular costs to folks and or the causes, or was it a pretty much universal picture as to what's going on?
In terms of the percentages between kind of lost revenue, contractual, legal costs associated with downtime, damage control, upgrade needs, those type of things, the percentages were roughly the same, but we definitely saw the United States a much higher cost of downtime compared to, say, Europe, with Africa and the Middle East being on the lower end of the spectrum. Without passing too much comment, but the United States, the legal side and the contractual side in the US was actually a slightly higher percentage than elsewhere. I think the other thing that we did see was another recent report we did on the state of security was also showing the regulatory pressure that is now being put on things like cybersecurity teams, where they're really having to balance the need of regulatory and compliance mandates versus cybersecurity. And they're actually actively having to trade off which one do they focus on, a stronger cybersecurity posture or better regulatory and compliance reporting and making sure they meet the needs of regulators. And I think that just adds into some of the complexity that we saw in the cost of downtime report, where we saw IT and security related incidents coming up high. It's showing that there isn't time for anyone in an IT related profession, whether it's cybersecurity operations, SRE, something like that, to do everything they would like to do. It's definitely a trade-off at the moment.
Okay, and I suppose I won't say what we've talked about as negative, but we've talked about the sort of the consequences, I guess, of downtime and the things that cost people time, etc. But you did also identify some sort of best practice or some resilience leaders in the survey. It'd just be good to understand. I guess they're able to sort of minimize downtime and its impact. And maybe you can say a little bit about the sort of things, if there were some common things that they were doing or not doing in terms of giving themselves the best chance of avoiding downtime or its consequences.
So I think we've definitely agreed, or definitely spoken about. I think agreed would be a strong word. That it is complicated, it costs you money. But on the flip side, if we treat it as inevitability, I'm going to have pressures on my organization. And if I think about things like DORA, which are the Digital Operational Resilience Act that is coming out of the European Union for banking, what it's really looking at is how do you cope with external and internal pressures on your digital systems and your processes. So really thinking about what could give me a bad day in the office. So when we talk about resilient leaders and digitally resilient organizations, they've really thought about what could go wrong and how we're going to go and mitigate that. So rather than just responding to things going wrong, they're pre-thinking, what are we going to do? Where's our greatest area of risk? And what that actually does is it gives frontline staff more confidence to be able to go and drive transformation. My personal view is that leaders and executives, they can stand on the stage and say, here's our 2030 vision, our 2040 vision, our 2050 vision, whatever it is. That's it. They don't drive the transformation from there. It's people on the front line that are making micro decisions every single day that end up having a macro impact. So when, as a leader, you start to bring in the concept of thinking about resilience, what you're really doing is allowing teams to go and think about, okay, if something goes wrong, how do I go and deal with that? I come from a consulting background. Application development consulting was my first kind of part of my career. And if anything went wrong, straight away you go and blame networks. It must be networks. Then you blame database and those type of things. Whereas when we think about a resilient organization, when something goes wrong, you've got networks, database, apps, maybe infrastructure sat in a room saying, right, where was the issue? Why are we seeing this differently? And how do we go and get through this together? So it's actually more about teaming and culture and organizational design. And that's why those businesses, when they get that right, they then can become incredibly agile, but not brittle at the same time. So the common themes that we saw were people had a downtime plan in place. So how do we instrument applications following runbooks, good corporate hygiene basically on that. Then how do you connect your team's tools to allow to share data and context? So not necessarily being able to say every team has to see every bit of data from every other application team within the organization, but how do you share the context, those signals to say something upstream or downstream of me is not behaving normally, therefore, okay, we might have an issue between these two applications or APIs. And you definitely need to perform postmortems if something goes wrong. But I'm a huge fan of a pre-mortem. Uh, Pre-mortems are my favorite things in the world. Everyone signs up when you sign up for the London Marathon for the first time. You've got this image of you being the fittest you've ever been in your life, losing lots of weight, going and runs with a dog in the morning. Then you say, like, for example, James never makes it to the front of the London Marathon. Why? Well, I hate running. I'm injured. I hate running. Small children. I don't actually like running. You start to see, well, actually, whilst it sounds great, I never would have got there. So you can start to think, well, how do I mitigate things? So a pre-mortem, I think, a really important business practice. And then having a really proactive approach to fireproof your organization. So predictive analytics, any kind of thing that starts to help indicate something doesn't look right here, to give the insight so you can choose what to do next. So an example, and we've seen this in customers, where a hard drive on the storage array may fail. Now that can have catastrophic consequences because maybe your database goes down or authentication or something like that, which means your entire service tree gets corrupted. But actually, when you notice maybe a hard drive's about to fail, you can say, what's the impact of that? Do I need to send someone to fix it straight away? Do I have time? Can I wait until tomorrow to fix it? And that then gives you choice on how you absorb that risk in the organization. It reduces panic, it increases confidence, and you just carry on with your day. It just becomes, hey, we've had an incident, business as usual, keep on going. And so I think those are some really important tips. Downtime plan in place, postmortems, pre-mortems, connecting your teams and tools together and being proactive with that approach and kind of looking for things that can help you say you may have a problem coming up.
Yeah, and were there any specific sort of technology investments around, I don't know, security, observability, and we mentioned AI earlier on, potentially is that creeping in as a help? Yeah, what were these companies investing in sort of common technologies?
Well, I think I think there's a big fear on the AI side that cyber criminals and threat actors are using generative AI to go and create new attacks or exploit new attack vectors. That's not yet being seen wholesale in the industry, but in preparation for that, a lot of it actually comes back to the basics. How do you make sure you have the right coverage in your organization? Checking for things like patch levels, being able to go and onboard data quickly, having a centralized security operations center. Where AI from a defensive point starts to come in is being able to take tasks off people's hands. So how can I auto-generate reports when I'm getting an incident to be able to go and summarize that for the incident team, for management, so the analysts can continue focusing on what they're doing, looking at better threats, bringing in threat feeds. So it's kind of carrying on what we've been doing as an industry, but just making it easier and faster to go and get complete coverage of my IT landscape. And I think on the big benefit on the observability side is starting to be able to use AI tooling and more predictive tooling to quickly understand what's actually happening in your organization. Before, we used to have an IT team and a security team, and they were different. Now what we're seeing more and more in the industry is those two teams starting to report up into the same person. So the same person is not necessarily in charge of like application development, but in charge of cybersecurity and digital operations, because they're both the same, they're different sides of the same coin. So the more kind of the tooling where you can have interoperability between those two teams. So when I see a cybersecurity incident, I can very quickly work with my IT colleagues to be able to understand, okay, what have you seen? Do we see it in the same way? How do we quickly go and get a fix to this? And can we automate that going forwards? Is always going to benefit both those type of teams together. They'll never merge. They're very different characteristics of people, teams, viewpoints, but the tighter those two things can work together, almost like a marriage, two different people, but if it can work effectively together, then you have a great way of running your digital operations and digital resilience.
Okay, and maybe just in finishing, I mean, a lot of organizations might need to sort of rethink and perhaps go back to basics. So in terms of coming up with some kind of downtime vulnerability audit, if that's not too extravagant a phrase, any thoughts? Because as you say, with all this complexity, it's maybe difficult to exactly discover, the impact. You say, for a hard drive, to understand all the connections, along the way. So just any thoughts or advice you can give folks as to how to start the process of discovering everything before they then maybe come up or try to come up with some kind of a resilience plan?
Yeah, I think I would say ignore tooling for the moment. Ignore what software tooling you have in there, and trying to not kind of state the obvious. Everyone knows, everyone listening to this will know they're going to have downtime. They need some planning. You do that anyway. But maybe the approach that I would suggest is think of this more as an organizational design and teaming and communications problem, and start from that as a first principle. So how do I go and get these teams working effectively together when something goes wrong? And then think about your tooling, because that's going to drive your requirements for, well, actually, if I need team A and team B when there's an incident to really quickly be able to get on top of this, I now have my requirements for, well, what tooling do I need? What runbooks do I need? What authority do I need to go and delegate to people to go and make those decisions as fast as possible? And that will start to help you decide or start your gap analysis to go and then begin the evolution of what I'm sure everyone has, which is their resilience strategy.
Okay, it's been great to chat to you, James, and as ever, you've given us some great insights into what's going on and some advice as to how to improve resilience in organizations. So really appreciate your time. Thank you
Thank you very much.